A man can fix just about anything if he knows how it works. Cars, engines, even people. But some things are too broken to repair. My name is Kent Bradford, 58 years old. I own Bradford's Garage, the same place my old man built with his bare hands. I've spent my whole damn life fixing things. Grew up under the hood of a Chevy, learned the value of hard work before I was old enough to shave. My hands are calloused, my back aches more than it used to, but I don't complain. The garage keeps me moving, keeps me sane. There's no secret to what I do. Cars break, people bring 'em in, I fix 'em. Simple. Folks in this town trust me because I tell them the truth. If your transmission's shot, I'll tell you straight. If it's a simple fix, I won't upcharge you like those dealership vultures. That's how my old man ran this place, and that's how I run it. Joel, my IT guy, is the exact opposite of me. Tall, skinny, always in a hoodie, eyes glued to a screen. I can change out a carburetor blindfolded, but ask me to reset a password, and I'm calling him. He keeps my website running and makes sure I don't get scammed by some internet crook. He was leaning against the counter one evening, tapping away on his phone while I finished up under the hood of a '76 Bronco. You know, Kent, he said, without looking up, you should really get an automated scheduling system. This whole writing stuff down on a clipboard thing is ancient. I wiped my hands on a rag. You telling me how to run my shop? I'm just saying, man, people don't call places anymore. They book online. They'll call if they want their damn car fixed. He smirked, shook his head. Whatever you say, old-timer. Joel had a smart mouth, but he was good at what he did, and he didn't waste time on small talk, which I appreciated. I had enough on my plate already. Lately, things at home had been off. Monica, my wife of 16 years, had been acting different. Not in a way that most people would notice, but I'm not most people. I pick up on things. Like how she used to hum when she cooked. Little songs she didn't even realize she was singing. That had stopped. She was always on her phone now, tilting the screen away when I walked by. And she wasn't home as much. First, it was book club meetings. Then, some painting class in the next town over. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. That night, I got home late. The garage had been busy, and I lost track of time. When I walked through the door, the house was quiet, lights dimmed. Monica's shoes were by the door, so I knew she was home. I found her in the living room, curled up in her chair, a book in her lap, but her eyes weren't moving across the page. You eat? I asked, setting my keys on the counter. She looked up, like she just realized I was there. Yeah, there's some stew on the stove if you're hungry. I could tell from the way she said it, she hadn't made enough for me. I nodded, didn't push. I wasn't hungry anyway. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter, watching her. Busy day? She shrugged. Same as always. Lie. I took a sip of my beer. How's the painting class? She stiffened, just a little, then forced a smile. It's good. I think I might start going twice a week. Lie. I nodded again, acting like I didn't notice. Later that night, she went to bed early, but I wasn't tired. I sat in my chair, staring at the old crib in the corner of the spare room. We'd set it up years ago, back when we thought we had a future that included kids. It had collected dust since then, but Monica never wanted to get rid of it. Said it was a reminder. Now it just felt like a damn tombstone. And for the first time, I had the sinking feeling that Monica had already left. She just hadn't bothered to pack her bags yet. The next morning, I was at the garage before sunrise, same as always. The shop smelled like oil and metal, the kind of scent that clings to your skin no matter how much you scrub. I liked it that way. It meant I was where I was supposed to be. Jared was a name I'd never heard before. But that changed when Joel called me around noon, voice flat and businesslike. You got a minute? I'm under a damn car, but go ahead. Well, I did what you asked. Ran a quick check through your wife's phone records. Don't worry, it's all legal. I just accessed the backup logs on her cloud account. Turns out she's been sending a lot of messages to a guy named Jared Morrow. Number's got a local area code, but I traced his business, tattoo shop, one town over. I let the wrench hang loose in my hand. That's so. That's so. Also, unless she's suddenly taken an interest in ink, I'd say there's something else going on. Calls late at night, long-ass text chains. Some of these messages go back months. I slid out from under the car, wiped my hands on my jumpsuit, and walked toward the office. You read him? Nope. Didn't have to. Patterns tell the story. You want M? I can send M over. I looked out through the shop windows. Sun was beating down hard, just kicking up on the road. Monica had told me she had an appointment in town today. She wasn't home. Probably with him. No need, I said. Joel was quiet for a second. You want me to dig deeper? No, I said again. I know enough. I hung up and stood there for a long time, staring at the framed photo on my office wall. Me, Monica, and the garage in the background, taking the year we got married. She looked happy. I looked solid. We were supposed to be, anyway. I had options. I could confront her right away. I could throw her crap on the lawn, set fire to the memories, make a scene like some sucker on a daytime talk show. But that wasn't me. Instead, I waited. That night, Monica came home late, same as usual. She had the nerve to smile at me like nothing had changed. I watched her move around the kitchen, setting down her purse, slipping off her shoes, same little habits she'd had for years. Only now, I saw it for what it was, routine. No different from a well-oiled engine, going through the motions until something locked up and the whole thing ceased. How was class? I asked, casual. She hesitated. A fraction of a second, but I caught it. It was good, she said, turning toward the fridge. We started a new piece. A landscape. Lie. I took a sip of my beer, kept my voice level. That right? She nodded, pulling out a bottle of wine. Yeah. It's nice to do something different. Another lie. She was getting sloppy. I leaned back in my chair, let the silence stretch out between us. She felt it. Shifted her weight from one foot to the other. I used to think she was just restless. Now I saw it for what it really was, guilt, chewing at the edges of whatever fantasy she built for herself. I didn't say anything else. Let her squirm. That night, when she went to bed, I stayed in the garage, picked up a busted alternator and started taking it apart, just for something to do. When a system fails, you don't panic. You don't start yanking at wires, hoping something sparks to life. You figure out where the break is, and you fix it. But some things aren't worth fixing. By the time I closed up, I had a plan. I wasn't gonna argue. I wasn't gonna beg. I was gonna do what needed to be done, clean, precise, like a well-executed repair. Monica thought she was making the choices here. Thought she had control. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Saturday morning, I packed my truck with a thermos of coffee, a couple of tools, and a folder full of papers that Monica wasn't expecting. I'd done my homework. The cabin was about 45 minutes out of town, tucked away past a dirt road with a bad habit of washing out in the spring. It wasn't hard to find. Monica had been careful with her texts, but she hadn't covered her tracks well enough. Joel made sure of that. I didn't rush. Didn't feel the need to. I wasn't angry, not in the way some men would be. No shouting, no fists through walls. Just that steady, cold feeling in my gut, the same one I did back in the service, right before an operation. The kind of focus that meant you already knew how things were going to play out, and all that was left was executing the plan. The truck rumbled over the gravel road, tires kicking up dust. The cabin wasn't much, small, rustic, built for weekend escapes by people who needed to unplug from the real world. I pulled in slow, rolled to a stop, and killed the engine. Her car was parked out front. I got out, took my time walking up the steps, my boots heavy on the wood. The place was quiet except for the wind rustling through the trees. I knocked, firm, 3 times. A few seconds later, movement inside. The door opened just enough for a man to peek through. Dark hair, messy like he'd just rolled out of bed. His t-shirt was wrinkled, some faded band logo on the front. Jared Morrow. His eyes flicked to my boots, to my hands, then back to my face. Can I help you? I looked past him. Monica was standing near the couch, frozen, holding a mug of coffee like she was waiting for it to disappear. Morning, Monica, I said, calm as anything. Her face drained of color. Kent. I held up the folder. I ain't here to fight. Just here for business. I looked at Jared, gave him a once-over. You gonna let me in? Or you gonna make this awkward? He hesitated. His fingers twitched on the doorframe like he was debating whether or not he should try to stand his ground. I could see the gears turning in his head, and I could see where they landed. He stepped aside. I walked in, the place smelling like old pine and burnt coffee. There was a blanket thrown over the back of the couch, a half-eaten plate of toast on the table. Looked like a damn honeymoon suite. Monica set the mug down, arms crossed, like she was bracing for impact. Kent, just listen. No need. I dropped the folder on the table. Divorce papers. Already got my lawyer on it. You sign. We keep it simple. No lawyers, no mess. I keep the house. You get nothing. Since you already threw it away, seems fair. She swallowed hard, fingers gripping her elbows. Jared shifted next to her, looking between us, probably realizing just how bad of a situation he'd stepped into. That's not Kent. I didn't plan this, okay? It just happened. I looked her dead in the eye. Engines don't just happen to break down, Monica. It takes neglect. Bad choices. I nodded at the papers. Go on. Make another. She stared at me, and for a second, I could see her debating whether or not she could still talk her way out of this. Whether the man standing in front of her was the same one she used to know. She must have seen the answer, because her shoulders dropped, and she turned away. Jared cleared his throat. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. I cut my eyes to him. Then shut up. He did. Monica's hands shook as she flipped through the papers, her breath coming short. You really had all this ready? Yeah. You were just waiting. I shrugged. I fix things for a living. And when something's too far gone, I scrap it. She squeezed her eyes shut, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe not. Didn't matter. I walked toward the door, stopping just long enough to look at Jared again. Hope you got a good job, kid. She's got expensive taste. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Smart. I stepped outside, the cold air cutting through the heat burning in my chest. The wind had picked up, rustling through the trees, but the cabin behind me felt dead quiet. I got in my truck, turned the key, and listened to the engine roar back to life. A clean sound. Strong. Uncomplicated. I drove away without looking back. I drove straight to the garage. Didn't go home. Didn't need to. There wasn't anything there for me anymore. I needed to work. Needed to put my hands on something solid. Something that made sense. I pulled in, killed the engine, and stepped into the shop like it was any other day. Joel was inside, leaning against the counter with a coffee, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when he saw me. Well, I grabbed a rag, wiped the dust off my hands. Handled. He raised an eyebrow. Handled how? Dropped the papers. Walked out. He let out a low whistle. Damn. That's it. What did you expect? Fireworks. I walked past him, grabbed a wrench, and started working on a half-disassembled engine block. I don't waste energy on junk. Joel watched me for a second, then took a sip of his coffee. Yeah, but let's be real. You gotta enjoy the fallout a little. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. I was already ahead of him. By Monday morning, Monica's bank account was frozen. I'd pulled every dime before she could. The mortgage was in my name. The utilities, too. I'd spent the last few weeks quietly closing every door she could try to walk through. She hadn't noticed, too wrapped up in her little daydream to see the walls closing in. Tuesday, the town found out. Small places like this, people talk. Nobody had to say much, just the sight of me working the shop like nothing had changed while she slinked around town looking for a couch to crash on told them everything they needed to know. By Wednesday, Jared's shop started bleeding customers. People don't like cheaters, especially in a town where loyalty means something. A couple of local boys must have paid his shop a visit overnight because his front window turned up busted. Glass all over the sidewalk. Couldn't say I condoned it, but I wasn't exactly losing sleep over it either. Thursday, Monica showed up at the garage. I was under a truck when I heard the door chime, followed by silence. Joel was the first one to talk. Bold move coming here. I slid out from under the truck, stood up, and wiped my hands on a rag. She looked rough, a hair a mess, eyes tired. She'd always been careful about her appearance, but now she just looked lost. Kent, she started, voice small, like that would change anything. I walked past her, grabbing a socket wrench from the toolbox. You signed him yet? She swallowed, shook her head. Not yet. I didn't look at her. Then why are you here? Kent, I know you're angry, but... I turned to face her, slow, deliberate. You don't know a damn thing. I tossed the rag onto the workbench. You think I'm angry? I'm not. I'm done. There's a difference. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. You just what? I leaned against the bench, arms crossed. Wanted to explain? Tell me how you didn't mean to, how it just happened. Tell me you regret it. I let the silence hang for a second. You don't regret what you did, Monica. You regret getting caught. She blinked hard like she'd been slapped. I didn't care. Her lips pressed together, and when she spoke again, the softness was gone. I gave you years, Kent. I nodded. And I gave you everything. And you threw it away. I gestured toward the door. Now get the hell out of my shop. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard like she wanted to fight, like she wanted me to react. But I wasn't gonna give her that. Joel, still leaning against the counter, let out a low chuckle. You heard the man. Monica's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Finally, she turned and walked out. The door swung shut behind her, and the shop was quiet again. Joel let out a long breath. Damn, that was brutal. I grabbed the wrench and turned back to the truck. Nah, that was necessary. Friday morning started the same as any other. I opened the shop at 6, turned on the radio, and got to work. The air smelled like oil and steel, the way it always did. The way it always would. Joel strolled in around 8, coffee in hand. Hoodie pulled over his head like he'd just rolled out of bed. He leaned against the counter, watching me work. So, word is, Monica's living at her sister's place. I didn't look up from the carburetor I was rebuilding. That's so? Yeah. Also heard Jared's shop is shutting down. Guy can't make rent. Apparently, screwing around with another man's wife isn't great for business. Who knew? I tightened a bolt, wiped my hands on a rag, and set the carburetor aside. Sounds like a him problem. Joel smirked. You really don't give a damn, do you? I met his eyes. Nope. And I didn't. Monica had made her bed. Jared, too. They'd spent months sneaking around, whispering in dark corners, thinking they were smarter than me, thinking they'd get away with it. Now they were paying the price. Not because I went after them, not because I yelled or begged or tried to win her back. I just stepped out of the way and let gravity do the rest. By noon, the shop was busy. Trucks lined up outside, engines coughing, transmissions slipping, people needing things fixed. That was the thing about work. It didn't stop for anybody. The world kept moving, and so did I. Around 3, a kid named Harvey rolled in, a teenager I'd taken under my wing a couple of years back. He'd been heading down a bad road, skipping school, getting into fights, running with the wrong crowd. His old man was a drunk, never around, and his mom was working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I gave him a job at the shop, showed him how to turn a wrench instead of throwing punches. He walked up, rubbing his hands together. Need me to pull the F-150 into Bay 2? I nodded. Make sure you check the belts before you start. They looked worn last time it was in. Got it. He turned to go, then hesitated. Hey, I heard about Monica. You good? I looked at him. The kid had been through hell, knew what it was like to be abandoned. I wasn't about to lie to him. I'm better than good, I said. I'm free. He nodded, like he understood, then went to work. Later that night, after I closed up, I sat on the porch outside my office, beer in hand, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The sky turned the color of rust, the air cooling just enough to remind me that seasons change whether you want them to or not. The door creaked open, and Joel stepped out, stretching. So what now? I took a sip of my beer. Same as before. Work, sleep, repeat. He shook his head. Man, you are the least dramatic person I've ever met. You sure you don't wanna, go on a road trip? Get a hobby? Start dating again? I snorted. For what? So I can end up right back where I started. He shrugged. Not all women are Monica. No, they ain't, I agreed. But I got everything I need right here. He nodded like that made sense, then sat down on the steps beside me. We drank in silence, listening to the cicadas, the distant rumble of a truck passing down the highway. After a while, Joel chuckled. Man, I was kinda hoping you'd at least key the guy's car or something. I smiled, took another sip. Nah, I do clean work. Saturday morning, I was at the shop before dawn, same as always. The world didn't stop spinning just because my marriage hit the ditch. Engines still needed fixing, people still needed their trucks running, and I still had a business to run. That was the difference between men like me and men like Jared. When things got hard, I worked. By mid-morning, the garage was busy. A guy rolled in with a busted radiator, another with a bad alternator. Harvey was under a Dodge, grease up to his elbows, muttering curses at a stubborn bolt. I watched him struggle for a second before walking over, nudging him with my boot. Try a breaker bar, I said. He wiped sweat off his forehead with the back of his arm. I was about to. Sure you were. I handed him the tool. Leverage, kid. Use your brain before you use your back. He grinned, braced himself, and the bolt gave way with a crack. Damn, that was way easier. I patted his shoulder. Smart men work less. Dumb men work twice. Joel walked in a little after noon, carrying a greasy brown bag. Brought burgers, he announced, dropping them onto the counter. I grabbed one, unwrapped it, and took a bite. You actually paid, or did you charm the girl at the register again? He grinned. A magician never reveals his secrets. Harvey grabbed his own burger, chewing while eyeing me. So, Monica really gone? Joel shot him a look. Dude. It's fine, I said. Yeah, she's gone. Harvey nodded like he'd been expecting that. She's an idiot. Joel whistled. Kid, you got a death wish or something? I chuckled, took another bite of my burger. He's not wrong. A customer pulled up, an old Chevy that had seen better days. I wiped my hands on my jumpsuit and stood. Break's over. Back to work. The day ran long, but I didn't mind. Work was honest. Work made sense. The sun was setting by the time I locked up. I stood outside, hands on my hips, looking at the garage. The sign was worn, the paint a little faded, but the place was solid. Built right. Joel leaned against his car, arms crossed. So what's next for Kent Bradford? I looked at him, then back at the shop. Same thing I do every day. He shook his head, smiling. You ever think about getting out of this town? Doing something different? I considered it for half a second, then shook my head. Nah. He laughed. Didn't think so. We stood there for a while, watching the last of the sunlight fade. The air smelled like grease and cut grass, the sound of crickets filling the silence. Some people chase change, think happiness is somewhere else. Not me. I'd built my life with my own two hands, and I wasn't about to throw it away just because one person didn't appreciate it. Joel yawned, stretched. Want to grab a beer? I thought about it, then shook my head. Nah, I'm gonna get some sleep. He smirked. Old man bedtime. Early morning work ethic. He clapped me on the back. See you Monday. I watched him pull away, then turned back to the garage. The metal roll-up doors, the smell of oil, the tools hanging just where I left them. This was mine. This was what mattered. Monica was gone, Jared was broke, and I had everything I needed. I shut off the lights, locked the door, and headed home. Sunday morning, the shop was closed, but I was there anyway. Some habits don't break, no matter what. The air was still cool, the smell of rain from the night before lingering on the pavement. I rolled up the bay doors, let the morning sun spill in, and took a long sip of coffee. The world had a way of cleaning itself up, washing away the mess if you just let it. A car pulled up. Not a customer, too early for that. Harvey got out, hands in his pockets, looking like he had something on his mind. You lost? I asked. He smirked. Figured you'd be here. I leaned against the workbench, waiting. He kicked a rock, then looked up at me. So, Monica's leaving town. Heard she's heading out west. Sister's got a place in Denver. I nodded. Makes sense. Not much left for her here. He hesitated. And Jared? I let out a breath, rubbing a hand over my jaw. Far as I know, he packed up his shit and left in the middle of the night. Skipped out on his lease. Probably running back to whatever city he crawled out of. Harvey nodded, kicking at another rock. Good. I didn't say anything. No point. The world has a way of balancing itself. Men like Jared? They don't last. They drift from place to place. Thinking a fresh start means they won't make the same mistakes. But they always do. Some men build. Some men break. He was one of the latter. Harvey rocked back on his heels. You ever gonna, try again? With someone else? I chuckled, shaking my head. Hell, kid, I just got done cleaning up one mess. I ain't looking for another. He grinned. Figured you'd say that. The wind kicked up, rustling the trees. The town was waking up, dogs barking, tires on gravel, the sound of life moving on. I drained the last of my coffee, set the mug down, and clapped him on the shoulder. Come on. We got work to do. We walked inside, the sound of tools clinking, metal on metal, the steady rhythm of an engine coming back to life. I didn't look back. There wasn't a damn thing worth seeing in the rear view.